Our guest today helps women tap into their potential, overcome adversity, and step into their power so they can become the person they were destined to be. Her belief is that every individual has the power to shape their own narrative and rise above their circumstances. She inspires, educates, and motivates single moms, domestic abuse survivors, and women with rough upbringings to reclaim their power and create a life they love. And we are delighted to have her with us here today, sharing her inspiring story. Katrina Harris, also known as Lady K, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And you know, all those things that we just described that you help others to do, well, you lived those things at one time, which
Absolutely
is why you're sitting here today sharing your inspiring story.
That is correct.
Let's unpack it a little bit more. You know, you make a point about the fact that you grew up in a home with both parents giving you love and protection. But it was when you stepped outside of that love and protection that life took a turn.
It did. My mom was and she still is, she was a teacher, and my dad was a sergeant major in the Army. The Lord blessed me to have two fathers. So we had a sergeant major in the Army, and we had a first sergeant in the Army. So, yeah, I couldn't ask for a better package of parenting there in El Paso, Texas.
Man. So let's talk about this, because when you talk about, and as we begin to really get into your story, when we say things took a turn and life giving you some of its greatest heartaches, it's because of love that you found in a young man. And most of the time when we hear a story such as this, it comes from a young lady who didn't have maybe the greatest household, who didn't have the love and protection of two parents. Most of the time, it's a single parent household, maybe the absence of a father. But in your case, you had a father. Mm-hmm. When you talk about a military father.
Both military fathers.
Two fathers. What do you think it was that caused you to gravitate to this young man who caused, I guess, you so much heartache?
Great question. I would say it was too much structure in the home. So we didn't really have the freedom that we wanted. They were so structured and all about order. When you get out of school, you got to do your homework. When you get done doing your homework, there's no TV. You got to get in the kitchen and learn how to cook. You have to read. My mom kept those standards at home. So when I got around other teenagers that were my age, and I see that they can do whatever they wanted to do, and go out, go to the mall, tell Mom, I'll be right back, go spend the night at other people's houses. Yeah. I never experienced that. My mom and my father, they were not having that. Yeah. So I started chasing that a little bit.
Wow. So many times as parents, we think it's all about the structure and the order, not realizing sometimes that can be to our own detriment because we have too much structure, too much order, so much so the kids feel smothered. So when they get any inkling of freedom,
they run with it. They take off and they run with it.
But you talk about it in your book, Freedom Ain't Free.
Freedom is not free. It is my journey from pain to purpose, because freedom comes with a cost.
Yeah.
And it comes with the price.
Yeah.
And that's why I entitled it Freedom Ain't Free.
All right. So we don't want to go too far. Let's back up a little bit and let's talk about, unfortunately, some of the price that you paid for this freedom that you searched for. This young man that you fell in love with at the age of 15. How old was he, by the way?
He was 22.
You're 15, he's 22. You married. So you loved to the fact that you married this young man. And talk a little bit about how that marriage went for you.
Ooh. Prior to us getting married, I was considered myself to be Cinderella. He was a Casanova. You know, he had the nice cars, he had the money. He just pretty much had everything. He would take me shopping, take me out to eat. He gave me a piece of that life that I was not getting at home. Yeah. Because with my parents is, you know, Christmas is every day. If we buy you shoes, be grateful. Yeah. Especially when I had family in Mexico who didn't have, yes, they had a roof over their head, but you talking about 10 people in a studio, you know, here. You're talking about having to use an outhouse, taking a bath with the water hose. That's what my family in Mexico had. And we were there all the time. But here, when you go from being Mexico to El Paso, Texas, staying on base, you have a house. So my parents would always say, you are rich. Money does not classify richness. If you have a roof over your head, shoes on your feet, clothes on your back, you can eat what you want to eat, you're wealthy. I didn't look at it that way.
Yeah.
Here was a guy who came, he had money, he had a car, he would take me shopping. We're over here with my parents, you had to earn it.
Yeah.
Through your chores, through your grades, it just wasn't given to you. So when you get that, listen, you're living on top.
Yeah.
You're living on top. And not only that, but my cousins, they got married early and they got out there early. And the true tradition in Mexico is either you have a quinceañera or you can have a wedding. So.
You wanted to skip the quinceañera.
And go right on into the wedding.
Wow. And you did.
And I did. Had a full-blown wedding and everything.
Yeah.
And
But then the day after.
Ooh, it changed.
There was no honeymoon.
There was no honeymoon. The day after, it changed. It went from shopping and doing whatever you want to now you're cleaning, now you're cooking, now you're cleaning drugs off the stove. Now you're doing all of that. Like,
And not just cooking and cleaning for him.
it's with his family as well.
Yeah, you're cooking and cleaning for everyone in the household.
Everyone in the household.
Because again, you guys are not in your own place. While he had this money and lavished you with money and gifts and the ride in the car and all this stuff in the dating process, once you get married, now you're living with his family.
with his mom and with his stepfather, Ted.
So you come out of your structured household
Yeah.
to now
Another house.
all in the family, you know? So it really wasn't all that it appeared to be, but in the eyes of a 15-year-old, you don't see it this way.
You don't see it this way. And you also see the culture that you were raised in with your mom on the Hispanic side.
Okay.
So on the Hispanic side, it's funny because men aren't allowed in the kitchen.
Okay.
Well, at least not my family. They didn't allow the men in the kitchen. You had to cook. You had to clean. You had to make sure you held down the house.
Okay.
You had to make sure that you were really submissive to them.
Okay.
So to me, that was normal.
And what was his race?
He was African American.
Okay. Okay.
He was African American.
Okay.
So to his family, it's like, hey,
Yeah, we got somebody who's going to really come in here and take care of business, and we can just sit back and chill.
we can sit back and we can chill.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it changed overnight.
Okay. So at this point now, even the women in the house are not even having to do anything because you're doing everything for everybody.
I'm doing everything for everybody. And he took me out of my own household and he took me to his household.
Yeah.
So it was me, him, his mother, and his stepfather. And I was the one cooking, cleaning, making sure the plates were made. And like I said, and cleaning up after they got done, making crack on the stove.
Wow. So this marriage turned into abuse. Not only you're cooking and cleaning, but there's abuse. There's rape throughout the marriage. I mean, you talk about it in the book in great detail. It's not the life that any 15-year-old or any wife or anyone would want to endure. But you find yourself not wanting to get out of this situation because at this point, you still haven't recognized your value of who you are. So you stay in this situation for a number of years, actually.
I do. And also because I thought it was normal. So I saw my mother get abused by my father, my biological father. I saw my aunts get abused by their husbands, physically and mentally. So I'm thinking, this is normal. This is normal. My mother stayed. My aunt stayed. My grandmother stayed.
Yeah.
So what makes me any different?
Okay.
So now my pride is I'm going to stay and I'm going to go ahead and do everything they want me to do.
And is part of it staying, hoping that the situation would change or you could do something to change the situation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm hoping that the situation would change because we were in church. We were in church very heavy. And at that time, we were a part of Church of God in Christ. And if anybody's familiar with Church of God in Christ, we're in church pretty much, I don't want to say every day, but Tuesday, Thursday, you got YPWW, then you got Friday night, all day Sundays, you got prayer services. We were in church a lot. And back then, when the bishop would get up to preach, the superintendent William Moore would get up to preach, God bless his soul, but he would say, if anyone needs any deliverance, come down to the prayer line. So in hopes that God would deliver him from that and his family from that, I stayed. I also stayed because the Bible talks about back then that we are to cleave to our husbands and leave our mother and our father. So on top of being an early bride and learning a new religion, because we grew up Seventh-day Adventist, to now Church of God in Christ, I stayed because of the words that I was hearing coming across the pulpit and the words that his family was telling me.
Yeah.
This is what the Bible says. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. And when you don't know the Bible for yourself, it can really be.
So they're using the word against you to keep you to stay.
They're using the word against you.
So you stay, and it wasn't until one day you're forced into a situation. You come home from work. There's a tragic situation that's occurred.
Yes.
That then unfolds to what's been hidden in the household can no longer be hidden because now law enforcement's involved.
Law enforcement is involved. So the funny thing is, prior to it getting to this point of law enforcement really being involved, they were involved in El Paso with the other smaller kids. Okay. So by the age of 16, I was already a mother and pregnant again. And I had 2 kids prior to law enforcement really getting involved, where CPS was already involved because he had already abused my younger son because he came out fair skinned. He didn't come out dark skinned like him. And so abuse happened prior to that. And we talk about that in the book, but I didn't leave. I didn't leave because at this point, I was scared to leave. So he convinced me to move to New Orleans. And prior to us moving to New Orleans, my pastor would say, if you go down there, you're going to go through the wilderness. Because God will do whatever he has to do to protect you. Now, we're all telling you not to go. And I like to say, well, the Bible says that I'm supposed to leave my family, my mother, my father, and cleave to my husband. They were like, yeah, but if you go down there, in spite of my parents begging me not to go, I went. And boy, was my pastor correct, because the wilderness did hit.
Yeah.
It hit.
Wow. And when it hit.
And when it hit, it hit.
It hit so much so to where not only did he end up in trouble with law enforcement, you ended up in trouble with law enforcement because you became, I guess, an accessory after the fact. Because of his abuse, you then, I guess, were looked at as if what you had turned a blind eye to it or something.
Right. They called it accessory after the fact because they said I was the mother and I should have left a long time ago.
Yeah.
But how do you leave when you are scared? How do you leave when this man is threatening to kill you and your family?
Yeah. But
So
law
you
enforcement
stay.
didn't see that.
They didn't see that. All they saw was a little girl who was on life support. That's all they seen. All they seen was you should have left when he burnt off your second son's umbilical cord, but you stayed. You should have left when he was putting out cigarette butts and weed butts on the bottom of their little feet, but you still decided to stay. You should have left when you ended up in the hospital with a broken arm and a jaw, but saying that you fell down the stairs. Wow. You should have left then. But they didn't see when the gun was to your head. They didn't see when you were being abused and you had bruises. They didn't see that. So in my head, it's like if I leave, then my whole family's going to be in a graveyard.
Because if he's crazy enough to do all these things, you're thinking,
My point exactly.
yeah, he can cross over and do those other things that he's threatened to do.
Absolutely.
And as you're listening, we're not talking in code. I don't want to give you all of the things that are in the book, but I do want to get to the part to where when we talk about freedom ain't free and you see the cover and they see you behind bars, there's a reason for that. That's not just symbolism. It did lead to you behind bars. And I think we do owe it to the audience to talk about the fact of what led to you being imprisoned, because maybe there is a woman in a situation who don't understand that the very fact that she could end up in prison may be in a situation similar to yours. So I think we do maybe owe it to him to at least talk about the story and how do you end up in, accessory after the fact?
It's accessory after the fact.
Yeah.
Because I was a mother and because I stayed.
Okay.
So because I stayed, and now you see a little young girl, a baby girl that's in the hospital at 3 months old.
Because she's been abused to the point.
Because
by her
she's been
father.
abused by her father. And I was the mother. And just to make it clear that I did not know that she was abused by her father. She's a small baby. She was, twitching at night every minute or two. I knew it wasn't normal. So I called my mother, and she's like, Monica, take her to the hospital. By this time, we were in New Orleans, Louisiana. And so I took her to the hospital. And that's when I found out that I pretty much married, I don't want to say a monster, but that's what he was.
Yeah.
He had a rap sheet that was a mile long that I never knew about in New Orleans, Louisiana. And so they said that I should have left. So they arrested me for accessory after the fact. And at that time, it was actually to attempted murder. It was a felony because they didn't know that they didn't know if she was going to make it. They didn't think that she was going to make it. So.
How many years were you sentenced to prison?
I actually was not, well, they gave me, I was back there for a year and 2 weeks. And they ended up giving me 5 years probation.
So talk about that. So because you started to say it, you weren't sentenced to prison? You were
No.
just
So I was
awaiting trial for a year and a half?
pretty much. So because of the charge that they gave me, they put me in OPP, Orleans Parish Prison, in Templeman 3. I didn't stay like in a county jail. They transferred me over to actually Templeman 3. And that was where you will find all the ones with heavy cases. So big felonies. You're talking about the biggest drug charges. You're talking about murder. You're talking about burglary. That's where I was at.
Yeah,
and that's where they housed me at. So I was there with people that were waiting transfer. I was there with those people because of the charge that I had. So they transferred me over there. The trial, because I was from Texas, now I'm in Louisiana. I don't have family here. And they didn't know what was going on with Shaniqua at the time or the boys. It kept on going back to back to back to back. So every time we would go to court, they would, give us a different date and set the date back and set the date back and set the date back. So I was there for a year and 2 weeks, actually.
So because you're sitting basically in transition for a year and 2 weeks,
For a year and 2 weeks.
you really don't have, quote unquote, the privileges of a prisoner. So do you get money on your books? Do you get visitation? Do you get those things that a prisoner would normally get?
Absolutely. So we had
Okay.
commissary. I was transferred over to a unit where you're literally in a unit. There's two people
Okay.
to a cell. They look like little apartments,
Okay.
And we had commissary that came by. My parents kept money on my books. A good friend of mine kept money on my books. I always had money on my books.
Okay.
And I had those same privileges, but they were still restricted because we only got 1 hour a day to go outside. We only got 1 hour a day to go in the gym. If we weren't outside or in the gym for the other 22 hours, we were confined in our little block, in our little cell.
So for a year and
2 weeks.
2 weeks, you were confined to a cell for 23 hours a day.
For 23 hours a day. Now you can get out and, of course you have like the cells that are around you. You have the showers that are outside because you don't have a shower in your room. And then you have the open area. There's one TV and of course there's tables.
Yeah.
So you could get out there, of course, but you're pretty much confined into your little dorm, I guess you can call it, into
Yeah.
like a little square dorm where there was probably around two to a cell, so probably about no more than 20 people.
And how old are you at this time?
I was 17.
So you're 17 years old. You've got 3 kids,
I have 3 kids.
one of which is a newborn baby, 3 months old, who you just left on life support
Pretty much.
because of abuse. What's going through your mind at this time?
And let's also talk about my other boys. My 2 boys, they were in a foster care agency in CPS.
So they're in CPS custody.
They're in CPS custody.
So you don't
because
really know what's going to happen with
I
them.
don't know what's going on. What's going on in my mind is, why didn't I leave? Lord, what did I do to deserve this? All I did was serve you. At this point, I'm like, God, what is going on? I did not sleep. Many nightmares, many tears, and many prayers.
So you're still praying?
I'm still praying. I was still praying until I ended up losing my faith for a little bit of time while I was back there, thinking that God had just turned his face and wasn't really worried about me anymore because he wasn't moving fast enough for me.
So how do you? Okay, so you're a woman of faith going into this, strong believer, someone who goes to church religiously, but now you're confined to a cell 23 hours a day. How do you make it through this without faith? What do you think allowed you to be able to get through it? And then was there a process to where you regained? And I guess, how do you regain your faith?
How do you
I have
regain
so
your
many questions
faith?
about that.
Right. So, it's funny because I remember in El Paso, Texas, always going to the county hospital with my aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And you would see people who were incarcerated in orange suits and handcuffs, because if they're sick, they're going to go to the county hospital, right? And when I used to go with my aunt, I would look at these people when I was younger and be so scared of them that I would run on the other side of the waiting room, not knowing that one day that same person would be me. So how do you make it? For the first couple of weeks, of course, I prayed to God, and then they moved me over to Templeman 3. I always say that God surrounded me with angels while I was back there from the first day that I got back there. And they used to call me Little Red. Little Red, why are you crying? Little Red, and I'd be like, oh my God, it's so open here. Going from somebody who always wore dresses 24/7, no makeup, dresses down to my ankles.
Church of God in Christ.
Church of God in Christ, that's all I knew, to everything now being wide open. Then they switched me over to Templeman 3 area. And I remember being so scared, and I would just stay in my cell. And then there'll be the mother of the block come and say, come on out here. And I'd be like, I'm not going out there. What y'all here for? You actually killed somebody. I'm not going out there. But then I've learned to adapt to them. And they became some of my biggest friends and my family while I was back there. It's funny because you never know somebody's story. There's always two sides to a story.
Yeah.
And they loved me, and they took me in as their own. We had a lot of pastime. We would make brownies with Oreo cookies and Snickers. We would do Roman noodles with pork rinds in them.
Survival skills.
And make it into a meal, right? What we were able to get from the commissary. We would play spades and dominoes. So we spent our time doing that.
Yeah.
But when the doors would shut at night, somebody would break out in a song saying he's that kind of friend. And then somebody else would break out in a prayer. And it makes you wonder, my first night that I was there and they transitioned me there, Faith broke out with he's that kind of friend. And I was like, I know this song. And then you hear the mother of the unit start praying. So now things are starting to look a little bit familiar to me.
Yeah.
So God, maybe it's not all bad over here.
Yeah.
And as soon as they started taking me and making me come on out and eat with them, we're going to be your family. So call me mama, call me daddy, call me your sister. Yeah. And so we formed a bond and we formed a pack. And then I started hearing people's stories, like the grandmother that was there, older lady. And I was like, well, what could you be doing here? She would say, well, baby, I already lived my life. So she took the rap for her son. They had a big drug bust and she took the rap. Or you hear the lady who burned their significant other on fire because she couldn't take the beatings anymore. Yeah. So it's a lot of different stories back there. And it's like, man, all these people, they're really not bad people. Yeah. Now, some are, but some aren't. And you learn not to be so quick to judge. Yeah. So you get a different perspective on life.
You get to humanize and understand that we're all human. And everybody just, made a decision at a moment in time. And they're not the sum total of that particular decision that they made at that moment.
Absolutely. And then we'll let them to that decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll let them to that decision. So we became a family, and I've had a lot of great memories back there while I was back there. And now my goal is to become a voice for the people that are back there. Yeah,
you do a lot of prison outreach, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. And I can tell, I can tell all the memories are not bad memories when you talk about the making of the brownies and things of that nature. Your face actually really lit up, and we're going to talk about the fact that you have a restaurant. Maybe you need to incorporate some of those things back at the restaurant. At some point, I don't know.
I don't know about that, but hey.
I mean, I'm like, it's an inexpensive way to make a brownie out of Oreo cookies,
I can't see getting a shoe now and just, hitting the bag.
No, we can't use a shoe. There's some, sanitary ways we could do it. We're in Texas. We make everything, Oreos out of everything. But anyway, I digress. Now, you talk about the fact that you had to gain the courage and the bravery. When we talk about stories, you were reluctant to share your story in the beginning. And understandably, because as we talk about, folks can be judgmental. But I guess I'd like to talk about what was the process that got you to the point to where you did gain the courage and the bravery that you needed to be able to share your story in the way that you do today.
It's funny because in 2018, I was at a conference at a church, and I ended up having a brain bleed while I was at the church. And during that time, I work in the medical field. A lot of people in 2018 were passing away instantly because of aneurysms.
Okay.
And I had got this really, really bad headache. And I was like, Lord, please don't take me out like this.
Yeah.
I ended up going to the hospital, and they ended up admitting me. And they say, you have a brain bleed. And I'm like, huh? Everything negative goes through your mind.
Yeah.
So they transferred me over to another hospital. And I was in ICU, and one night, the Lord said, I saved you once. I saved you twice. What am I going to have to do to wake you up? I need you to tell your story. Yeah. And it was at that moment that I still kind of wrestled with it a little bit because I still didn't want to tell it. It took me 28 years to literally resurrect it from the dead is what I call it.
Wow.
Because I didn't want people to know my story. I was worried about what if they fire me from my job? What are people going to think? Are they going to really accept me? I was just worried about all the what ifs.
Yeah.
The what ifs. And not only that, but my mom really didn't want me to tell the story. She didn't want to relive it again. None of my family did. My brother, none of them. And then most of all, I had to really think about my children. But when he says tell the story, by any means necessary, and being in that hospital room for a week made me realize it's time to tell the story.
Yeah.
I should really be, the doctors looked at my husband and said, we're lucky that she's even still here. And we're most lucky that even though she made it, she's not a vegetable. She doesn't have a peg tube.
Yeah.
And because I see these kind of patients in the field that I'm in, you got to be grateful and you got to be thankful because it could have been me. So God, what are you trying to show me? What are you trying to tell me? Okay, guess what? You won.
Yeah.
So the process to healing started in 2018.
Good stuff. Because you've got an amazing story, and you just talked about when you said your husband, because you have since married, been married over 20 years
Over
now.
20 years now.
How long exactly?
Ooh, we'll be married 21 years this year.
21 years. Talk about your life, your family dynamic today. Let's
Oh my God.
unpack your family dynamic now today, your education today, all the things that have transpired. We gave the folks the backstory. We need to now transfer forward to where you are today and
where
all
I'm
the
at
wonderful things that are
now.
going on in your life today.
Oh, well, so today you're looking at somebody who was an early ninth grade dropout to now she has her master's degree.
Yeah.
Now God has sent her an amazing man.
Yeah.
He's literally my best friend. We do life together. And I work in the medical field at a wonderful hospital. And we also have a restaurant called Smokey D's Barbecue that is in Duncanville, Texas.
Yeah.
My children are all doing amazingly great.
And what are their ages now?
Ooh, my oldest is 31. And my youngest is 26. And then we actually have a family of 6. So really the youngest is 22.
Okay.
The youngest is 22. But the ones that went through the journey with me, that was a part of Freedom Ain't Free, is 3 of them. Well, actually 4 of them. And the oldest is 31 and the youngest of the 4 is 26 years old.
Okay. That's just a beautiful thing when you can talk about, yes, early on, things were a little rocky, things were a little rough. Yes, the pastor was right. There was the wilderness. But you know what? God is true to his word. The latter days are always going to be greater. And those days are certainly great in your story.
They are.
And I'm glad that you have decided to come back and reach back for those women who are finding themselves incarcerated or for whatever reason, but you've not forgotten about those women. Talk about your prison outreach and, again, why that's important to you to continue to do that today.
More so it's important to me because I need to let people know, especially the ones that are incarcerated, that if I made it, you can make it too.
Yeah.
Your past does not define your future.
Yeah.
Only you define your future. There is an expiration date to everything in life.
I love that.
There really, really is. There's an expiration date to depression. There's an
Yeah.
expiration date to the day that you choose to become free. There's an expiration date to everything in life. So you determine when your expiration date will be here.
Yeah.
It took me 28 years to determine my expiration date.
Yeah.
But once I determined it, everything fell into place. So now I'm here to be a voice for the voiceless. I'm here to be a voice for that mother who thinks that a man will not want them because they have a child who's disabled or because they have a child who's autistic. Mm-hmm. I'm here to be a voice for the lady who is in a domestic violence abuse relationship. I'm here to be a voice because people can receive better when you've been through it versus someone that just talks about it and who has not been through it. So I'm here to let them know that if I made it, you can make it too. If God sent me somebody that loves me and for my children, then guess what? God has somebody for you too. I'm here to be a voice.
You know, I can't help but think that there will be young ladies who will be attracted to this interview because they may find themselves in the very situation. Can you look directly into that camera and do exactly what you just said? Speak directly to that young lady who may find herself in the situation and she hasn't really yet realized her worth. So she can't quite come out of that situation because she doesn't know her worth just yet.
Absolutely. Just know that I want you to first just know that I need you to keep going and keep glowing. I know it's not easy, but know that you got this. Learn to love you. And once you learn to love you, the game will change. You don't have to stay. You do not have to stay. And I'm going to say it again, you don't have to stay. But if you choose to stay, know that that is going to have an expiration date. But learn to love you more. And learn that if I made it, you can make it too.
You certainly can. And you know what? Thank you so much for all that you're doing. And thank you for just sharing your story. Two things before I let you go. What do you want readers to take away from your book, Freedom Ain't Free, My Journey from Pain to Purpose?
My Journey from Pain to Purpose. I want readers just pretty much, again, just take away, don't give up. Don't give up. You write the narrative to your own story and you write the conclusion of your story. So do not give up. I just want this to be an inspiration.
Yeah.
Don't give up. You got this. We got this. And God's got you.
Final question for you. You've achieved so much, from going on to getting a master's degree, to your family dynamic, to owning your own business, to your feats in the medical field, to all of the things that you're doing, to ministry, to prison outreach, and all the things you're doing. I think I saw a flyer recently where you're going to be traveling out of the state to go minister at a women's conference, things of that nature. So you're on stage speaking at women's conferences and things of that nature, doing the work that you do for women. But what would you say is your greatest achievement?
Learning how to love me is my greatest achievement. Learning how to believe in me, because that took some time to do. It took some time to do. But when I did, the game changed.
Yeah.
That is my greatest achievement.
Thank you for doing it, because of what you have done and learning to love you, you are now being a blessing to so many others. So, Katrina, Lady K. Harris, thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Howell. I
Absolutely.
appreciate you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching. And again, her information is on the screen. Be sure to check her out. And again, be sure to get the book. It's going to certainly be a blessing to you. And be sure to follow her on all of her social media channels. And we'll be back next time to share more with you.
Thank you.